Hello, here's a spell, and welcome to the Spell Re. Now, if you're new to this series, please check out the other parts. If you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe. And we shall start off this what if. Now, what if Midoriya had dimensional magic, which is a crossover between My Hero Academia and Black Clover. Now, what happened last week? We ended with Bakugo Midoriya's hero training fight. As Midoriya won, like King Cannon, Ida became MVP, and Bakugo, All Might, and pretty much the rest of the class is wondering what's up with Midoriya's quirk. Little did they know it was actually magic. And without further ado, let's get on to the new content. The rest of the matches would go as in canon, with Todoroki standing out. After those matches, as Ida just walked up, "Yes, Midoriya, I just saw your fight with Bakugo on the monitors, and you managed to produce a sword? I thought your quirk was some sort of teleportation." Midoriya would just say, "It's a lot more complicated than that." As Bakugo walked up and said, "Hey, nerd, how the heck did you get so strong?" As Midoriya would just say, "Well, a lot of different things. My quirk's very in-depth. I don't want to bore you." With Bakugo huffing, "There's something else there." Bakugo wouldn't have the same inferiority complex as in canon due to stuff that happened earlier on in this What If, but he would still be very interested. The next day, Midoriya would be going to school when he found dozens of reporters outside the school. Apparently the knowledge about All Might being a teacher had been revealed to the public. And the reporters were going nuts. They would try to get an interview with Midoriya, but he would try to get away. The reporters would actually surround him and start trying to boggle his mind with answers before he just said, "Minor teleportation," as a purple light would surround him as he would disappear. The reporters would wonder what happened to him, as on the other side of UA's defense wall, he would just appear. Happy that he managed to get that to work. Aizawa, walking to try to get the reporters from harassing the rest of the students before they were late, would just see Midoriya and say, "Glad to see you managed to make it. Going to class, I'll be there in a minute." As everyone else managed to shuffle in about 10 minutes late thanks to the reporters harassing them. Luckily, one of the teachers had already told them that it wouldn't be held against them since it was due to external circumstances outside of the school. And very obvious external circumstances. As Aizawa looked at them seriously, once he walked in, as everyone was freaking out that it was another quirk apprehension test. As Aizawa, in a very serious tone, told them that they had to pick a class representative. Everyone was pretty thrilled that it was just a normal school event. No crazy life and death match, or another quirk apprehension test. This would go very similar to in canon, with Ida actually being elected this time as class representative. Off the bat. Ida was surprised, but he seemed like the most capable person to a lot of people. After all, Midoriya seemed a lot more of mysterious in this one, so not as many people voted for him. Ida and Uraraka did, but there was just enough votes to get Ida in, with Momo being his vice rep. Ida would be unsure as they went to the cafeteria. The group would start talking about their families as Uraraka revealed the reason why she wants to become a hero is actually for the money. Ida and Midoriya had a bit of a surprised look on their face, but they were going to let her continue before they judged. And then she explained that her parents were actually poor and she wanted some way to help them out. Ida and Midoriya would tell her that that's a great reason. As Uraraka looked happy, she thought she would be very highly judged. As they're eating, Midoriya would ask Ida how his family is, and Ida would actually mention that his brother's a pro-hero called Ingenium. Midoriya's eyes would lighten up and say, "Oh, that's a famous pro-hero family." Ida would nod, mentioning that it went all the way back to his grandfather, and that he wants to make them proud. But right after Ida told Midoriya and Uraraka about his family, Midoriya would sense something. It felt like mana, but that was just in the other world, as he referred to the Black Clover universe. As the alarm started going off, everyone started to freak out. Ida would ask what was going on. Then one of the second years passing by would say, "Those are the alarms for a villain attack. That's never happened." As everyone got their butts in gear. The problem is, the normal drills for calm and orderly had been completely forgotten. The hallways packed side to side. Both Hero Chorus and the normal students were trapped between a rock and a hard place. Most of them didn't quite know what to do. Ida would get shoved against the wall and notice that it was just the reporters that had been harassing him earlier that day. As Ida tried getting everyone's attention, telling him it was the reporters that were harassing him earlier that day, but everyone was in a panic and couldn't hear him. He would manage to touch Uraraka, and she would be able to float him up and over the crowd. Above the exit door, he would tell them that it was just the reporters and to look outside. They're UA students. They should be better than this. After a majority of the students realized what was going on, they felt ashamed. Well, mostly the non-Hero Course students, because the Hero Course were kind of just stuck there, as the day would go on in normal. But little to their knowledge, the front gate had been destroyed with a power. As that drama settled down, the next day, Midoriya would go to the Black Clover world to deliver some spices. And he had an odd request for delivery. It was some information about quirks. Midoriya took his own notebooks, because he had notebooks on quirks, and brought them. Apparently, Yami knew someone who was very interested in quirks, and Asa had told him about quirks. When Midoriya handed Yami the book, Yami said thank you, and then proceeded to say, "Geez, Julius, you couldn't just ask the kid yourself?" Before rolling his eyes. Midoriya didn't know what to say, and continued on. School would be normal for the next few days, when Aizawa told them to get on the bus. They were going to go to a field trip. As the students would get on the bus, as Ida tried forming them into a seating arrangement, but with the bus having an odd seating arrangement for standard buses, Ida just kind of gave up on that, as everyone started talking. As everyone got on the conversation of different quirks, Midoriya would actually compliment a couple people on their quirks before Sue would ask him about his. Midoriya would just say it was complicated, but basically he had a dimensional type of ability. Similar to space, but vastly more complicated. As everyone once again shrugged at this very, very vague answer. Bakugo would be looking at him incredulously, still trying to figure out what on earth his quirk was. From his information, it was one thing, but from what Bakugo's seen, it's something other, or maybe more than one quirk. As we actually flash over to All Might, as he's been doing a lot of hero work, realizing that he's actually starting to run out of time, as he starts mentally scolding himself. He had told UA he would be there to help teach the class. He would feel down, especially with the fact that he needs to find out what Midoriya's quirk is, or if he has multiple ones. As he started to be worried that Midoriya had some sort of connection to All for One. After all, that's the only way he could think Midoriya had almost completely different abilities. From what his quirk paper said, and from what he saw, it almost seemed like multiple. But All for One wouldn't have just given him all those quirks and not altered his paperwork, right? He would shake his head as he arrived at UA, as he went into his small white form. Once he would mentally scold himself again, hoping that maybe he would be able to get to the end of the class at least, if he didn't stretch himself too hard during. As everyone would arrive at their field trip destination, as Hero 13 would meet them outside and say that this facility's the USJ, ushering them in. She would explain that this was specifically designed to train heroes for rescue duty. as she went into an explanation that quirks can be very dangerous if not used correctly. As Midoriya sensed that mana again, walk over to investigate since mana should only exist in the other world. But then when he walked over, he would see a dark portal opening up and what looked like figures walking out. Aizawa would yell over to Midoriya to pay attention, but would end halfway through his statement, as he told everyone to get back. 13, get the students to safety. As 13 asked him what was going on, but saw what was going on. Villains were invading. As several students would ask if they were props, Aizawa would just tell them, no, this is serious. As Midoriya, in his hero costume, would just tell, unlike in canon, Midoriya would just tell Aizawa to be careful before he went back to the rest of the group. Aizawa would jump down and confront several villains right away, disabling them. But before the group could make it to the door, they would be confronted by Koagiri. As Midoriya realized he was the one emanating mana. Wait, no. There's two. As he's pretty sure there's at least one back where Aizawa's fighting, and then this guy. What's going on, he would think. As 13 was about to tell them to get down, Bakugo and Kirishima would jump in front of the rest of the class, trying to attack Koagiri. But at that moment, Koagiri's dark mist would shoot out. Midoriya would get in front of everyone, pulling out his grimoire and saying, "Dimensional Shield!" as a round shield would appear in front of a good chunk of the class. But everyone else would get teleported. Midoriya would clench his teeth in frustration before 13 told everyone to get out of her way. She would remove one of her finger caps on her suit and start trying to suck Koagiri in. But it would only hold Koagiri for a minute, as he created a portal behind 13 and started sucking her into the portal using her own quirk. Koagiri would just chuckle at this, and the fact that the reason why this is happening is that 13 over-prioritized rescue work over combat. Within a couple seconds, 13 would have closed her cap and would have had bad lacerations on her back thanks to her quirk. Uraraka and Ida would rush to her, with both of them confirming she was still alive. Midoriya would just say that someone has to run outside. Their communications have been jammed ever since the villains entered. As everyone wanted Ida to go. Was gonna protest, but Midoriya and the rest of the class would just ensure him that he was the right person for the job. He was the fastest one of them. As Ida just said, well, what are you going to do about this villain? As Midoriya pulled out his grimoire and his staff, and just said, I'll be fighting this villain here. Ida, you go. As everyone was kind of curious, why did Midoriya have a staff? As he pointed out the villain as a blast of energy would shoot out from it, as it passed through some of the villain's smoke. As everyone just started getting even more confused. As Ida would make a rush for the door. At the same time, Midoriya would use Shift and appear behind Koagiri, kicking him in the back. Koagiri would grunt, as Midoriya just said that he had thought he had seen something metal. As Uraraka used this moment to run up and touch Koagiri, reversing his gravity, as one of the buff students would manage to punch Koagiri away. Midoriya would then use minor teleportation to get behind Koagiri and try launching a spell at him. Dimensional Magic, Void Sphere! As a dark sphere would go up and try to expand and absorb Koagiri. Koagiri would use his smoke to create a portal, as there was a flash of white light as both techniques counteracted each other. As Koagiri would use his black smoke to attack, and Midoriya would use Shift again. As Midoriya and Koagiri would start to have a scuffle. Meanwhile, checking in on everyone around, Bakugo and Kirishima would be battling villains in the Earthquake Zone. Shota Todoroki would be freezing villains in the Landslide Zone, with other students being under attack or trapped in other zones. Sue would have been sent to the Water Zone, but managed to sneak away from the rest of the villains, swimming towards shore where Mr. Aizawa was. Meanwhile, Aizawa would, after swearing to himself after accidentally letting a villain escape, as the main villain with hands, Shigaraki, would actually start saying, I think I figured out how your quirk works, as he runs forwards. As Shigaraki would manage to touch Aizawa's elbow as Aizawa muffled a cry of pain as part of his arm decayed, as he quickly used his erasure quirk on Shigaraki before pushing him away. As Shigaraki just said, "Yes, you wear those goggles to confuse your opponent and who you're looking at, but your true tell is your hair. It stands up every time you use your quirk. And you can't use your quirk continuously. Every time you blink, your quirk deactivates." As Aizawa would start to really think that this fight wasn't going to go his way if he didn't try to stop this now. After all, this villain had just figured out his quirk's weakness. And with that information, it won't take very long for others to surround him. As someone ran up behind him saying, "Huh, I bet you can't counteract my mutation type quirk," as Aizawa just kicked him. As Shigaraki just said, "Geez, I know we got these guys for a premium, but some of them aren't that bright. Nomu, finish this." As Nomu would dash up to Aizawa and slam his head into the ground. Meanwhile, with Midoriya firing off offensive dimensional smells, while Kogiri would counter. Ida had already run out of the building, and there's nothing Kogiri do about it. He did keep trying to neutralize Midoriya, but he kept dodging. As Kogiri would start to say something. "I've figured it out. You seem to have multiple techniques. But two things stand out. Every time you say shift, you teleport to where you can see. And every time you use teleportation, you teleport to somewhere where you can't see." As Midoriya clenched his teeth. He was right. My minor teleportation got him to where he couldn't see with things like behind walls, while shift managed to teleport him to wherever he saw. As Kogiri would then just say, "Interesting that we managed to find another person with a spatial quirk. We're so rare. It would be a real shame if I had to kill you here." As Midoriya just pointed his staff towards him, saying, "It would be a real shame if you didn't just surrender and save me the trouble of beating you," while trying to channel his best you-know impression. Midoriya would start sweating a little at the fact that this fight wasn't ending quickly. At this rate, he might run out of mana. As Kogiri teleported away, he would teleport to where Shigaraki was, with him explaining how one of the students had escaped. Shigaraki would start scratching his neck, saying that if it wasn't for the fact that you're our way out, I might just kill you. But oh well, All Might wasn't here to start with. But maybe, just maybe, we'll get his attention by killing a couple of these kids. As he quickly turned around, noticing Sue had been watching this interaction. But right before he touched her face, Midoriya would come down, this time with his dimensional sword, as he brought it down, trying to cut off Shigaraki from touching Sue. Knowing that whatever his quirk is, it must deal with touch, considering he's going to grab her. But before he could, the Nomu would move in front of him, taking the sword strike instead. As Midoriya quickly jumped away, with Sue diving into the water to get away from Shigaraki. I see we have a hero. Actually, that's kind of ironic. I guess you'll just have to go. As Midoriya quickly braced himself. He had just followed Kogiri, not wanting him to actually help the villains escape or attack his classmates again. He wasn't expecting this, as he turned and saw Aizawa on the ground. As he clenched his teeth, thinking, this isn't good. I'm way over my head. I kind of wish I switched places with Asta right now. Meanwhile, Asta, he was currently dealing with the whole dungeon arc. As Midoriya would be staring down Shigaraki and the Nomu, the doors would explode open as All Might walked through, gritting his teeth. As he said, I am here. And that's where we're going to leave it. I was going to do more and leave on a different cliffhanger, but this is just going and going, with me adding some more stuff. Now, if you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I am trying to improve my quality a little bit over my quantity, with some different ways of doing it and whatnot. If you like this content, then I hope I see you around. This will be Spellry, signing off.